And welcome back to Lantern Corp video. And this one comes to us from Clyde5520. So what Lantern Corp does Timmy Turner from Fairly Odd Parents belong in? Now, Timmy is a very, I literally just went through all the Lantern Corps, and I quickly came to the conclusion that there are not a lot of Lantern Corps Timmy Turner can fall into. Now, this stems from the problem that, take the later series out of the equation, where I think he became 11 and 13. Oh, no, he didn't. Maybe he did. I think he grew up a year or something in the later parts of the series. I know there was one TV movie where he aged a lot. Pardon. But, because he's a 10-year-old kid, his personality is very much in flux. And because he's the main protagonist, whether or not certain things work with him is debatable. Let's get a couple out of the way that we know for a fact he's not going to qualify for. And then I'm going to talk about the two, and it's two, that I think he does qualify for. Now, by the way, if you disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. In fact, I encourage you to give me your take on this character, if you think, on any character I do in these types of series, on what Lantern Corp you think they could belong into, and why you think they could belong into one thing once I don't think they could. But let's break down three of these to start with, and then I'll show you one I think you can, then we'll go break down the other ones. Right at the bat, Lantern Corp of Fear. No one is afraid of Timmy Turner. He is a 10-year-old kid. If anything, Vicky scares the shit. Vicky would be the perfect Green Lantern. You kidding? Or Yellow Lantern. You kidding me? She terrorizes these kids. But there's no way to, unless he's using a wish. And that's the problem here, is that Timmy, in theory, could make a wish that could qualify him for any one of these. At one point, Timmy is probably qualified for just about any one of these Lantern Corps thanks to a wish. When he got rid of all his emotions, he could be a Lantern, he could be an Indigo Lantern, because he completely lacked any empathy whatsoever, because he was completely compassionless. Madly, he's got a massive crush on Trixie, but that doesn't necessarily stem to a Lantern Corp ring of Sapphire. We'll talk about that when we talk about Sapphire. There's been times where he's been very intimidating and scary. But that's all due to wishes. We have to look at Timmy as his actual character. As his actual character, there's no way he inspires fear in anyone. It's just not who his character is. Likewise, he's not really a Lantern of Rage. He's a kid, sure, and he gets angry, sure, but let's be clear. If that were the qualifications, every kid on the planet at some point would become a Red Lantern. And first off, I don't think there's enough Red Lantern rings to go around. But furthermore, it's that's just, you need to be just driven by your rage. Just anger beyond all contempt, all belief. And Timmy just isn't. He's got moments of being angry, sure, and he will carry that, but he ultimately learns his lesson in the end. And, he just goes back to his daily life. Not really a Red Lantern trait. It would have to have someone who just is constantly angry a lot. Like the Hulk is a perfect example of a Red Lantern. Wolverine would be a good example of a Red Lantern. Obviously, Atrocitus. There's a cat that's a Red Lantern because it lost its owner and was filled with rage about that. And I mean rage. It was it was overriding every one of his other emotions. Timmy's just a kid. Rage doesn't work. And as I said with love, yeah, he's got a crush on Trixie, and that does motivate him in some circumstances, but it's not his driving force. It's not the thing that overrides all his other emotions. Because let's be clear, lust can also count towards love as well. But if that were the case, every horny teenage boy ever would become a Star Sapphire, and that's not how that works. So let's talk about one of the two that I think he actually does qualify for. Green. Now, Green, it's actually not the one I think he's most likely going to get. I think the other one's the one he most likely gets. And the reason I say Green is because Timmy gets into a lot of trouble. He gets into a lot of scenarios where he's got to use his wits and things along those lines to get himself out of it. And despite his grades, Timmy's actually not that dumb. He's witty. He can think on the fly thanks to all the stuff he's been in. He's just not academically smart. Now, Timmy does get scared a lot. Actually, he's nowhere near as scared as someone like a Carl or from Jimmy Neutron, or like a Courage or something like that. But he does get scared from time to time, sure. But he ultimately, he stood up to aliens. He stood up to, like, super villains. He stood up to Mr. Crocker multiple times, other fairies, magical beings. Timmy's got a lot of courage in his heart. Remember, willpower is one thing, and imagination, Timmy, with all his wishes, certainly has that down. But it's the ability to overcome great fear that is really what Green Lanterns look for. So, yeah, definitely Green as a possibility for Timmy, but I don't think it's his most likely candidate. So let's talk about the other three that I don't think he qualified for, technically. We already talked about Indigo very quickly, but let's address it real quick again. You either need to have the compassion as your most dominant trait, or you need to be completely compassionless. And Timmy, except for certain times where he makes certain wishes, is not. Let's move on then to Life and Hope. Timmy's alive. Ergo, he could qualify for the White Lantern ring, but he hasn't really, again, take wishes out of the equation. He is just a normal human. Now, granted, he's a little kid, and honestly, a little kid would not be as bad of a candidate for a White Lantern ring as some other people would. They're not mature enough to really understand the responsibility of what they hold, but they do live their lives. A lot of kids have energy. They want to experience life, have fun. So, in theory, you could make that a qualification. But it's just one of those things where it isn't really all that feasible that Timmy Turner is any more unique than any other kid in the world who does not have the White Lantern ring. Then you have the Black Lantern ring. By all accounts, Timmy technically can't qualify for a Black Lantern ring. He does not worship death, embody death, killed millions, billions, whatever, nor is he dead. Technically, though, he did die at least once. But it was in a virtual magic game he was playing. And he got an extra life. That's why I was able to come back. So, I don't know if you could qualify that. That's a really weird gray area. If I were to put my money on it, I'd say no. But I'd be interested to hear what your takes are on that. Because that is a really weird gray area of a scenario. Last but not least, the other lantern between blue and orange, which one is the least likely? Which one does he not qualify for, and which one do I think is actually the one he would get the ring for? Well, unfortunately for you believing he's such a good person, the ring I think he gets is most likely to get is actually the Lantern Ring of Avarice. Because, let's be clear, the fairies are there to grant his wish, to grant his greedy little desires as a kid. Now, granted, Timmy isn't as maybe self-absorbed as that would imply, but he still wishes for God knows how many things for his own personal use, own personal benefit. Yeah, he tries to do some good now and then, but it's all he just wants more in some way, shape, or form. He's not satisfied with what he has half the time. That's why he has his fairies. That's why the fairies were given to try to make his life better. Now, in the future, we know he does eventually lose Cosmo and Wanda. And ultimately, and I'm just cleaning my computer over there. And ultimately, think words here. And ultimately find happiness and stability. But as a kid, by the definition of having fairly odd parents, and as a kid, and let's be honest, most kids are kind of selfish in a little bit. It's that child selfishness, to be sure, unless you've spoiled your kid rotten. In which case, shame on you. That's your fault. But it's that childish selfishness, but it's still selfishness. And then when you add wish-granting fairies that could pretty much do whatever you want, yeah, I think the greed kind of starts to get. And Timmy has shown to be power hungry on some on levels, be egomaniacal, have things go to his head, and abuse Cosmo and Wanda's wish-granting capabilities to some degrees. So, yeah, I mean, and if he wanted the ring, he could wish for the ring, and by all account, there's nothing that would stop the ring from just leaving Larfleeze at that point and just going to Timmy. So, now, granted, you need to have a certain level of greed in you for the ring to even want to attach itself onto you, but the ring is also amplifies your greed to God knows how many, to the umpteenth level. So, yeah, I actually think Timmy is a prime Orange Lantern candidate in many ways. I do think green is a possibility too, certainly. but I think orange is also a possibility. I think it's a little stronger than his green. Apart from that, blue, there's no reason he could qualify for blue. He does not inspire a lot of hope in anyone, quite frankly. Save for maybe Cosmo Anna, and that's more like hope, like he's going to learn his lesson from the bullshit he started. But, I mean, ultimately, look, this is just my opinion. I'm going orange for Timmy Turner. What do you go? Orange, green, or is it any of the other 7 that I said? And could you make an argument for it? Like I said, I could hear an argument being made for the Black Lantern ring because he did die at least once, technically. But the circumstances around that is very hit and miss. I could see the most mild argument for maybe like a red or a sapphire, but it'd be a mild one. In my opinion. But if you could make a solid argument for it, I'd love to hear it. But until then, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. As always, want us to review something, put the comments below. Let us know. We'll do a review of it at some point. And ideas for who would win, Star Wars, superhero, magic, what if, anything you do on the channel, put that in the comments below. Let me know. I'll get to that at some point. Hit that bell if you want notifications. I will see you folks next time. Later.